We are live, just a little bit early. Welcome, everyone. Before we go ahead and do a formal introduction, we'll wait for some people to come in. And if you do come, because I have a bunch of people, hello, who hi to Carol and hi to Christy. Can you both hear me okay? I'm wondering. We just had a little bit of a potential issue. Hello I'll post in the chat. Okay, we've got confirmation from our fine guests, fellow colleagues and writers as well. We'll introduce my old ears. I just some reason I thought we may have had a sound problem, but it's great to hear that we are all set. Welcome everyone to Nighttime Logic. Nighttime Logic is the parts of the story that are often felt but not consciously processed. It's also the name of our show. Today is Thursday, March the 12th, 2026, and it's also launch week for The Midnight Muse by Jo Kaplan, who, as you see, I'm very fortunate to have with us. How are you, Jo?
Good. It's so nice to be back on Nighttime Logic with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for always being such a great guest. Let me introduce you for those watching who may not be in the know. Jo Kaplan is a Shirley Jackson Award-nominated author whose work has been described as addictive, as beautiful and moving as it is creepy by Publishers Weekly, and immersive, chilling, and compelling by Library Journal. She's the author of It Will Just Be Us, When the Night Bells Ring, and The Midnight Muse, as well as short stories which have appeared. Let's get a double Midnight Muse going on the screen. It's always so much fun. And her short stories have appeared in places such as Fireside Quarterly, Black Static, Nightmare Magazine, and other award-winning anthologies. In addition to writing, she teaches English and creative writing at Glendale Community College and is the co-chair of the Horror Writers Association's Los Angeles chapter. She also plays cello in both the Symphony of the Vertigos and the indie Spanish rock band Guerra Paz. Find her at jokaplan.com. Welcome, Jo, and congratulations on The Midnight Muse. Hope you're having a very happy launch week for the book.
Thank you.
Tell us about the book, or tell us about these main characters who we're going to meet right in the beginning of the book.
Yeah, so just kind of a brief description of the book. It is about a female-led metal band whose lead singer goes missing in the Oregon Umpqua National Forest. And a year later, the rest of the band goes to the woods, stays in a cabin there for the weekend to kind of mourn her and figure out how to move on. And then they begin hearing her voice singing out in the trees. And they're wondering, is she haunting the forest or is something far stranger out there? And I think it's pretty clear from the cover that there is something pretty strange out there, mushrooms. So the book is really driven by the characters in the band. And actually, if you're curious about them, I'll talk a little bit about them, but if you're curious about them, I made an Instagram post a couple hours ago with like a little profile of each member of the band. So if you pull that up, then you'll see, oh, this is the lead singer, this is the guitarist. But the lead singer who goes missing is Bryn Werner, and we are introduced to her right at the beginning. The very, very first couple of lines of the book says, "There's always that one friend, the one from whom you could never stand to be apart, your hands nesting together, easily as secrets passed from mouth to ear. That childhood friend whose presence was magic. For Harlow Sorensen, Bryn was that friend." So we're sort of immediately introduced to Bryn, who is a very important figure in Harlow's life. Harlow is the drummer of the band, and she's really the main character. So she and Bryn have been inseparable their whole lives. They started the band together. And so when Bryn goes missing, Harlow is lost. She's completely devastated. And then we have the other members of the band who also trickle in. There is Harlow's brother, Thorne, who is a guitarist. There's the bassist, Luella Diaz. There is a cellist in the band. Of course, I had to add a
Big
cellist.
surprise.
I was like, why not? Wendy. And then there is the lead guitarist, Reese, who is very ambitious and tends to butt heads with the other members of the band. And as they kind of come together in the forest, you know, some of them are thinking the band is done because Bryn was really the anchor that held it together. She wrote all the music. She was kind of the leader. And Reese is like, no, we have to keep going. And so we get some tension there.
It's such a great book. It's full of so many of my favorite things. I mean, like, okay, it's a dark and spooky Jo Kaplan book, but you, like you said, you diving straight in to not only music, the music which plays such a big part. It's never far from the forefront of this book, but also one of my favorite things, like band dynamics and band tension there. And so yeah, I am interested in those. Let's. I don't think I could link it very easily. I probably could, or someone more technologically adept. How can someone find those Instagram posts about your fictional band character?
Oh, well, my Instagram handle, we could just maybe post that because it's the most recent
Yeah.
post. It's at Joanna Perry.
Let's see if I got it right in there. Did I get that right?
Oh, sorry. I should have spelled it. JoAnnapary.
JoAnnapA.
RY.
Okay, one R.
Yeah.
I was a little too ambitious there with so you can go head over to at Joanna Perry and check out some of the Instagram profiles for the characters in this book. One of the things very early on in the book, the characters they're talking about a haunted or a cursed song. This song is called Gloomy Sunday, or something the band members, or I think it's just called the Hungarian suicide song. Tell us about this crazy song and how it relates to the band Queen Carrion, the band in the Midnight Muse, how that relates to one of their songs and how the plot gets going.
Thank you. I realized I didn't even mention the band name from the book.
Yeah,
Queen Carrion. Yeah.
Queen Carrion, great name.
Yeah, so I stumbled across, I don't know how, I stumbled across the Gloomy Sunday. I don't know, I was just looking up interesting music, cursed songs, creepy music history, and that came up. It was, I think, from like the 1930s, and it has this reputation where people listen to it and have committed suicide. So there's something really unsettling about that. And when you listen to the song too, it is kind of a creepy song. I don't know. There's something odd about it, even though it's not meant to be a creepy song. So I thought that was fascinating that a song could get this kind of reputation as having this sort of effect on people when they listen to it. And so I kind of drew on that for Queen Carrion's most famous song called Midnight Ritual. And this song has a reputation because when they were playing a show, in the middle of that song, the lights all went out and everybody freaked out. And there was a mad dash to the exit. And in that mad dash, one of the concert goers died. So people started to think that that song was cursed, that that song had somehow made the lights go out, made this really unsettling, weird atmosphere kind of take over the music venue. So that's kind of the thing that they're known for. And later in the book, they get a little bit more into what happened there and how it ties into what's going on now with them.
Yeah, it just has such a dark verisimilitude. I mean, unfortunately, live music is full of such tragedies like that, but also the other side of the verisimilitude. Music really does, when it really hits us, it really does border on the mystical or the magical. So it's easy to see how people feel that way, and that's one of the things that's so great about the book is how you get that's really comes through there. There are a lot of awesome musical details that the characters talk about. One that struck me was at one point one of the characters. It was just an aside. They were talking about how the cello is the closest thing to the human voice, and you are also a cello player. How or how not did your experiences being a musician and being in a band affect the characters and the writing of the book?
Yeah, that line that the cello is the closest instrument to the human voice is something that I've heard before. I think it's primarily because the range of the cello, it has we can play in 3 clefs, which is unusual. Most string instruments can't play in that many clefs. But the range of the cello it covers the entire range, basically, the vocal range of the human voice. So I think maybe there's that. There's something about the timbre of it that it's it's very human. So I always thought that was an interesting little tidbit, and Bryn would I felt like that was something Bryn would say. Like she would think about that because she's a singer. She's also deeply invested in music and what it can do. Um, she wanted to have a cello in the band, so so I kind of threw that in there. Uh, and I guess in terms of how my experiences as a musician informed it, I actually wasn't in a band until after I'd written at least the first draft of the book. But I'd always wanted to be in a band. But, you know, when you're a cellist,
It's
how many
not like
in a
everyone
band?
needs that drummer. It's like, damn, get us a cellist player now.
That is funny because my band is basically there's 3 of us. Um, singer, guitarist, cello, and then we have somebody who does, like, second guitar and sometimes, keys. But for a while, we were like, "Why can't we get a drummer?" So it's funny that you mentioned that. We're like, "Where are all the drummers at?"
Yeah,
Um,
they all blew up auditioning for Spinal Tap or something like that.
yeah, but, you know, what we don't sometimes we have a percussionist come in and people kinda come in and out. We have a trumpet player who comes in and out. But I have noticed that when we've played shows, people tend to get really excited that there's a cello in the band. They come up to us afterwards and they're like, "Wow, it made it so different and unique." So I just think it's a lot of fun getting to write music and play it.
I would be one of those people too. I think cello is a wonderful instrument, and it is pretty underrepresented, at least in perhaps mainstream rock or goth rock or metal. And that line, go not to focus too much on that line where the human voice line, it does sound, even though it sounds like it's something, it's just a statement of truth, it does sound like there could be something mystical about it, especially if it's something that we're attributing um, to Bryn there. In the music, whenever I see, and it's not too often that there are strings or a cello in a band, I'm excited because yeah, it does add something to it, and I think a lot of the times strings or at least digital strings are the realm of the keyboard player, but there's something so much more special when it isn't electronic, and even if you're close enough to hear the resonance,
Mm.
and even in the non rock and roll performances that I've been fortunate to see over the years, I think cello is perhaps the most, it's the most gothiest of the of the string instruments. There's this event in New York, a place called Cathedral of St. John the Divine, and they do a Halloween show every year for decades. And the first thing you greet when you that greets you when you're coming into this amazing space is just a solo cellist, just playing. I don't think they're playing the Hungarian song. I don't know what they're playing, but yeah, they're just playing something, and it's just solo, and there's something special about it. Um, Besides cello, who are some of your who are some of your favorite bands, or who are some of the bands that may have influenced your portrayals of Queen Carrion?
Yeah, well, to stick with cello for just a second, probably the biggest cello in metal kind of instance would be the band Apocalyptica. All cellists playing metal. They started out playing Metallica covers, and they've done a bunch of original music, and they just put out a follow-up with more Metallica covers. But
That's
yeah,
amazing.
that's really the place where cello and metal comes together.
How many cello players?
There's 4, I think.
Wow. All
Um,
cello all
yeah,
the
and,
time.
and a drummer, I think. But yeah,
Okay.
it's all. But you know, they plug in, they turn on the distortion. It's very cool. Um, Aside from that, I do love metal, and I actually recently posted to my Substack on the day that my book came out. So my Substack is books, booze, beats. It used to be just books and booze, but I added music. So I pair book recommendations with cocktails that relate in some way, and now also with music. And so I shared on that post a Spotify playlist that I had made. Um, that is my like, this is the music that inspired Queen Carrion. So it's mostly a lot of melodic death metal, which is
Awesome.
the genre that I like.
I'm, I'm
But yeah, so you can
I'm new to it,
check
so
that out, and then you'll
I'm
know what the genre.
anxiously looking forward to checking it out, so I can both. I'm just so curious as to how, um, yeah, what inspired it, and to learn some new bands. I'm definitely a beginner to it, but it's really exciting. Um, so yeah, there's the music element to this, which is just, yeah, you could see how I just couldn't resist diving right into it. But there's also, this is a horror book. This is a spooky book. Like you said, when you were introducing Bryn early on, we know that Bryn goes missing. It's such a great structure, how it's Harlow's loss and Harlow's pain, and how it explores and unfolds that way. But the band goes looking for her, and we immediately sets up sort of a cabin in the woods type situation. There's young people. They're in an isolated area, the woods. Um, what were your thoughts on this trope, if any, when um, beginning to put the book together?
Yeah, so as a lover of like gothic fiction, I'm always leaning towards settings that have that sort of classic creepy feel to them. So I'm like, of course, a cabin in the woods. I also tend to gravitate towards isolating settings, especially in the 21st century where we're not. It's harder for us to be isolated.
Social
um,
media is everywhere, even in our conversations today. It's just there. So when
yeah,
it's not there, for us, for people who experienced world before social media, it's somewhat of a throwback. But maybe for some of us who didn't, it's a new kind of space.
hmm So I so I was thinking, okay, isolated in this cabin in the woods. Um, and of course, when you write something like that, I'm constantly aware of the tropes, right? There's been numerous cabin in the woods, very famous cabin in the woods stories, movies, Evil Dead, literally the cabin in the woods. I love those movies. And so I do have the characters directly comment on it because they're metal musicians. I feel like they're keyed into horror. Um, it would be almost impossible for them not to make some kind of mention. So I think Thorn, Harlow's brother, he's the one I think that mentions they find a like a trap door in the cabin that leads down to a cellar, and he's like, "Don't go down there. Haven't you ever seen Evil Dead?"
Yeah.
I'm like, that's exactly, and I guess I kind of drew inspiration from my own experiences there too, because the cabin itself was sort of inspired by a cabin that I visited with some friends in Idlewild in California. We went up for a weekend. A really lovely trip. Nothing terrible happened. Our cabin was wonderful, but I remember the day we got there was Friday the 13th. So we were constantly
Wow.
making jokes about how we were going to get axe murdered. Um, so I thought, of course, they're gonna make some jokes like that.
You were tempting that weekend. You were just like, hey.
Yeah.
But in what way, without, I know it's launch week, without giving too many spoilers, in what way did you subvert these tropes, and in what way did you steer away from them?
So I think that for me, I'm always trying to. I feel like I often use some familiar elements in my books and then try to do something new with them or take them in an unexpected direction. So I think for this book, um, the first half maybe kind of plays into what you might expect. And then there's a shift that takes place about halfway through where we sort of discover something new going on and
Mhm.
maybe go to a slightly different place. And I guess that turn, which subsequently reveals a little bit more about the cabin itself. I guess that's maybe my subversion of the trope, and I don't know that that's helpful or interesting to anyone who hasn't read the book and has no idea what I'm talking about, but maybe
Yeah,
it's like a little hint.
I think it is. I think it is. Even without saying what the shift is, so they could still experience the fun of that. But I love knowing that. So it's another great thing just about how you did it with this book. It's something that still delivers what we love and familiar about the genre, yet still it's not a rehash. It's not just an on the nose replay about cabin in the woods. It's like, yeah, you're gonna get that vibe, you're gonna get that element and setup, but it's still very much its own thing in play. And for my money, I'm always I'm always excited when that happens, and you do it so well in the Midnight Muse. Um, let's talk. Let's talk a little bit more about the band. There was something that uh, it's before the disappearance, and the structure of the story is it's sort of a mosaic of places and time. So at some points we do get to see, um, although Bryn is missing. In the present of the story, we do get some flashbacks where we do get to see the full band together. And at one point, when the band is having tension, Bryn says, I don't want someone coming in and changing everything. I want us to stay um, Queen Carrion. And that it had a lot of verisimilitude to me. It felt like something that is just an issue all maybe rock and rollers experience, maybe especially when they're blowing up or becoming big. Tell us about that band dynamic for Queen Carrion in the Midnight Muse.
Yeah, I think that that tension is something that most artists experience, and that could be musicians or writers or anyone in some kind of creative field. That tension between wanting to remain authentic to what you want to create, but also wanting to be successful. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful, but you know, what happens sometimes when a band blows up or somebody gets really successful, people sort of expect them to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, or expect them to conform to something, and that may not be exactly what they want to do or where they want to take their art. So uh I guess I wanted to explore that tension just a little bit, in those brief scenes that we get with the entire band. Bryn is obviously deeply invested in the band's art to this like mystical level that you mentioned. She is like following something that has been haunting her in her head. That's this drive, this passion, um, and so that's her focus. And then you have Reese, who is like, we have to make money. We have to be successful. Like, we need to pursue these opportunities that we might have this meeting with a producer or something. Um, and so he's more willing to, I guess, not like give up his artistic integrity, but compromise in order to, you know, make it big.
He's willing to
So
cross lines that might step over, that might be forbidden lines for Bryn and her art.
yeah. So and I understand both perspectives here, and I don't like Reese. He's not great. I mean, he's annoying. Um, but I also understand his perspective. I think that's important when you're writing characters that are unlikable or not, the protagonist, who is meant to be a character that provides tension with the characters that maybe you're rooting for. I think it's important to still understand where they're coming from. And I do understand where he's coming from. I mean, I feel it. I want to be successful. Who
Right,
doesn't? But I also want, I mean, as artists, we want to have our cake and eat it too, right? We want to be
right,
successful, but we want to be authentic to our art. And that doesn't always line up.
right. Oh yeah, we love the album. Now just take out that edge and we'll put it in all the stores. Just can you make it friendlier?
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Actually, that just reminded me that back when my agent was submitting the Midnight Muse to publishers, there was a big five, there was a horror imprint of a big five publisher that was looking at it, and they were like, "We really like it, but it's at like a 5 in terms of how graphic it is. Could you take it down to like a 3?" And I was like, "No,
can you just take?
that's like
We love this book. Can you just take out the horror?
that's an
Can
extremely important part of what the book is. Like, if you
Yeah,
take out a lot of the body horror, it would just defang so much of what's happening. So, I mean, I don't know if they were actually offering any kind of like revision, but there was just sort of the suggestion, and I was like, no.
yeah, and I'm sure it was a good. I the industry is full of things like that where people whose job it is to try to take quality material and make it more into some sort of a center, just because they're looking at, okay, we could sell the book and make X, but how can we make X and Y? And they mean well, but um, yeah, going back to people like Bryn who have a vision that borders on the mystical. um, I think it was something that was cool was that we get to see the band working on their concept album, which was called The Orchid, which we're getting closer and closer to what might be sort of the shift of in this book. But only Bryn, when we see Bryn's replacement or we see the band after Bryn, you show by omission about what that magic was that Bryn brought to it. So I just thought it was really cool that you have this unfinished concept album that only Bryn knew the final song, and it was never completed before her disappearance. So I think it really is a great vehicle for highlighting all these tensions. Do you have any favorite concept albums, real or otherwise?
I think probably the best concept album I could imagine is The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. it's just, it's like a perfect album. Uh,
Yeah,
can't find the others.
I mean, just a character who just really comes to life. I mean, yeah, and there's something about rock and roll and concept albums that just go together. There's just something.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to tell a whole story across an album. That said, when I'm listening to music, I'm not like seeking out concept albums or honestly paying that much of attention to it. I just like the music, but I appreciate the idea of telling a story throughout multiple songs. Um, and there's, obviously something very literary about that.
Yeah. Do you when you write or when you wrote the Midnight Muse, you mentioned the inspiration playlist. Do you actually listen to that, or is it just in your mind, or both, or neither when you're creating?
It was just like the inspiration behind what I think they sound like, but I actually find that I can't listen to music when I'm writing because it's too distracting. And even sometimes, well, especially if it's music that I like, then I start listening to the lyrics and I'm like getting into it. And now I'm like, what am I writing? But even sometimes with instrumental music, if it's like a classical piece I really love, then I'll start paying attention to the music. And So I know a lot of people love to write with music and they can do that. And I kind of just need to write in silence so that I'm not distracted.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, I think we are definitely the minority. I think a lot of I even had one teacher, I won't name their name, but a really fine teacher who was like even um, almost made the mistake of thinking that everyone was like that. Like when we was just sort of trying to set up the class, be like, okay, now put on your headphones or do this. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't. I'm with you. I've learned to write in situations that are not my perfect. Like so, if I had my perfect situation, yeah, I would want the silence because music would just be. It would slowly but surely. A completed masterpiece is so much more interesting than this story I'm wrestling with. And wow, okay, that's my favorite. I love it. Or this is new and I love it. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I think it's almost like when you love music so much
Yeah.
that I want to pay attention to the music. So I have to do something that doesn't like require deep thought and concentration and words coming out of me, while I'm listening to music.
So you said some of these are you said these are songs. I forgot what you said, but it you're trying to figure how do the songs that inspire you, or you're trying to make up just capture the vibes or elements in them that will find their way into the story.
Just like for this playlist, it was mostly just for fun. Um to capture the vibe of what I think the band would sound like. It's a really interesting thing writing about a fictional band because their music doesn't exist. I'm
Yeah.
writing about music that no one has ever heard because it's never been written. Um, and so I felt like I wanted to at least have a sense of what they might sort of sound like. So I looked for, some female-led metal bands, obviously, to kind of capture that vibe, and also the kinds of sounds, the tone. I just kind of liked having that in my head as something that helped me to know the band a little bit better. And when I was thinking about their songs, because I do include some song lyrics in the book. So I wanted to have in my head a kind of vibe about how those lyrics might sound, how the snippets that we kind of get might sound. Um, and I think sometimes as a writer, just having that background understanding comes out in little ways in the book, and the reader, even if I'm not putting in direct like explanations of these are the inspirations, um, readers can sometimes catch the vibe that's coming across.
Yeah, I think fiction and music, and it seems like it's metal. They seem to just have such they seem to lend themselves, or just they seem to be the ones that cross over the most, in terms of metal bands writing about their favorite songs. Or metal bands or maybe prog bands seem to be the ones that will really go there and be like, yeah, a double-sided, triple-sided concept album. um, I have a few more questions, but would you feel like reading some of the book for us?
Sure, let's
Yeah,
do that.
I'll turn
We
it
were
over.
just
I'll turn
talking
this.
about concept albums, and that actually kind of plays in a little bit to the section I'm going to read. So,
Perfect. I was going to ask you to set it up for us. So I'm going to put you on the solo screen and set it up, and we'll see you after the reading.
okay. So I'm going to read chapter 5, and luckily I've kind of set up a little bit in the sense that all of the characters are going to be in this chapter, so you kind of know roughly who's who. The one character that I haven't mentioned is Jacqueline, who is Reese's girlfriend or fiance. And she kind of shoehorned her way into this trip, even though she's not a member of the band. And the others find her somewhat annoying and don't really want her there. Um, and so this is, I think, the first night that they're at the cabin in the woods. They're hanging out. A couple of them just, they've been drinking. A couple of them just did some mushrooms. And uh, I think that's pretty much enough to set this up. Luella Diaz felt the scrutiny of eyes as soon as she stepped outside. The woods stood around her like a black wall as she flicked her lighter impotently against it, a few quick sparks marking out the quiet punctuation of a tiny flame. Maybe it was because her hand held the sole source of light, aside from the stars ducking in and out of clouds and the cabin windows burning behind her, that made her feel like she was on stage, the audience a blur of shadowed trees. But it wasn't just that she was aware of her visibility in the otherwise blind dark. It was, as far as she could tell, that prickling feeling, almost like a sixth sense, of being watched. "Hello?" she ventured. "Anybody out there?" No reply but the distant hoot of an owl, the rise and fall of cicadas. She had never enjoyed being watched. Curious, perhaps, for someone whose livelihood entailed being on stage, but it was never about the performance for Lou. It was always about the music. That's all she wanted, and something she believed she'd long shared with Bryn. The music was everything. It was the whole reason for the charade of touring and labels and all that other industry nonsense. Perhaps it was the mushrooms making her paranoid. She could never predict how they would affect her. She sat on a stump beside an ashy fire pit. A damp chill settled in the air, the late May reminder that summer had not yet ripened, that spring's indecisiveness could still crystallize into overnight frost. When the others came out, someone suggested lighting a fire. Getting it going required a search for kindling, which yielded twig slivers and dead leaves, and the solid snap of a lighter. The wet smolder gave a breath of smoke, then crackled to life. They put their hands out for it, grateful. The fire threw itself into the dark, which beat with hunger. "I feel like we need to feed it with a scary story," Lou said, the fire. It whiplashed into sparks and diminished. "It's unstable. You have to feed it, like any other living thing." "I didn't realize fires ate scary stories," Harlow said through a haze of smoke. The light raccooned her eyes and sharpened the angles of her face. "And here I've been feeding it wood." Thorne sat as far from the fire as he could without slipping past the event horizon of night. He certainly wasn't the type to feed a fire anything. At least, not after he'd had to feed it half his face as a kid. Wendy poked it with a stick. Red-hot wood crumbled into glitter from the corner of a log. "I'm pretty sure fire can't digest narrative." "I have a story." Jacqueline leaned in forward until her eyes blazed. "Do you?" Harlow said. "The fire needs to eat." Jacqueline's fingers rippled over the flames, perilously close. "We shouldn't starve it." A low hoot cut through the drone of insects and underbrush rustlings. They could better hear than see the movements of the woods. Trying to look out tricked the eye into thinking it was blind. The only way to beat back the darkness, thought Lou, was to touch it. "Go for it." Harlow's elbows dropped onto her knees. "Yeah, tell us your terrifying tale." Jacqueline's lips curled into a smile as she leaned toward the fire. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who always felt different. She lived in a cemetery, and her world was dirt and rot. She ate bugs and drank the fluid excreted from corpses." "Jesus," Wendy interjected. "Still, these things fed her, nourished her. She was like a little flame burning bright in that dead place. Only everything kept trying to snuff her out. Storms would roll in and beat her with cold rain. The dead would reach out from their graves, desperate for a morsel of life, of warmth, all the things they didn't have. One day, when she was wandering that vast graveyard, she wasn't paying attention to where she was going, and she walked too near an open grave. She fell in. A 6-foot wall of dirt separated her from the ground above. It had begun to rain. The dirt beneath her turned to mud, then to a wet brown sludge that rose up her ankles to her knees. She called out for help, but there was no one to hear her. The mud kept sucking her down into it. Worst of all, she realized she wasn't alone. Jacqueline stopped talking. Her eyes snapped to the wall of trees. Firelight shivered on her face. "Did you guys hear that?" Harlow snorted. "Nice try." Wendy shook her head. "Finish the story." After a beat, Jacqueline dragged her gaze back to the fire and blinked in its glare. She cleared her throat. So she wasn't alone in that wet grave. As the water rose, she saw a skeleton bobbing to the surface, bits of decayed flesh still clinging to it. And it wanted her. It wanted her warmth. She felt its bony arms reaching for her through the mud, grabbing at her, trying to pull her down with it. She pushed it away. But she left a black handprint on the bone. She had burned it with her touch. That's when she realized. When people got too close to her, they got burned. She thought it served them right for trying to snuff her out. She wasn't the only little flame out there, of course. There were others. She was rare, not unique. Apart, they were small and brief, but when joined together, they would make a large, many-fingered flame. When the girl was able to swim out of the grave, she decided to gather them all up so they could be together. One by one, she took them into her, and as the flame ate and ate the smaller flames, it grew larger and hotter. Eventually, it was large enough to sweep away everything that wasn't fire, and the world burned with a steady living energy, destroying the dead. And compared to the living flame, everything aside from itself was dead, or at least on its way there. The great fire was the only thing that lived eternally. Time didn't mean the same thing to the great fire as it did for the ephemeral spark, a star popping into existence and burning itself out in an instant. But after an eternity of peaceful burning, its planet drifted too close to a black hole, and it was ripped apart and swallowed, and that's the orchid. Jacqueline's mouth was still open, sentence unfinished, as Harlow sniffed and took a drink. I don't know what you're talking about. You literally stole that whole story from the orchid, but you changed the flower to a flame and you threw it into space at the end. Jacqueline shook her head, smiling. Great minds think alike. Well, I don't know that I'd call that scary exactly, Lou said, but it was creative. Jackie's a great writer, Reese elbowed her playfully. Right, babe? Hey, speaking of the orchid, can someone else please tell a better story? Harlow cut in. Something that's actually scary. Silence swarmed in as they looked around at each other. Lou hesitated. Eyes turned her way. I mean, I have something that's pretty scary. Thorne leaned back, stretching his long legs. Go on. I don't want to freak you guys out too much. Well, now I'm even more interested, Harlow said. Mosquitoes lighted on her arms, and Lou pulled her sleeves down despite the fire's heat. It's a true story. You ever hear of Ryan Kilkenny? Head started shaking. Ryan was something of an outdoorsman. He and his boyfriend Arlo had done all kinds of things together. Climbed mountains, spelunked caves, scuba'd. I guess you could say they were no strangers to wilderness or adventure. So when their 5th anniversary was coming up in 2018, they decided to do something a bit less strenuous and go on a hiking trip to the Umpqua. Wendy was already shaking her head again. Oh, no, not here. Not a good idea. No. Harlow pulled out her flask, took a fortifying sip. Tell it. Everything started out okay. They had their tents, their gear, but before they ever managed to set up camp, they got separated. Arlo searched for Ryan all night, calling into the woods for him, but he was all alone. The next day, Arlo made it back to civilization and alerted the forest rangers that Ryan was missing. Only he couldn't quite explain what had happened. They asked him how they had gotten separated, but he had no explanation. He just said that he knew Ryan was still out there and they had to find him. They searched for 3 weeks, at which point, as you can imagine, they were starting to lose hope. Harlow snorted and poured the rest of her drink into her mouth, face skyward. Wendy sat with her hands over her mouth, looking a little gray. After 3 weeks, 2 volunteers within the search party and a sheriff's deputy saw a figure limping through the trees. They called out Ryan's name, but they got no answer. So they pursued the person, not wanting to lose him. And when they found him, well, at first they didn't know what they had found. He was naked and red all over. They thought he was covered in blood, maybe from an animal he'd had to hunt to survive, but that wasn't it. When they got closer, they saw his skin was flayed off. He was just red muscle, still holding the bloody Swiss Army knife. Wendy sucked in a breath. He did it to himself? Lou nodded. He was delirious when they found him, and it makes you wonder, this guy with all his adventures under his belt couldn't handle himself for a few weeks? I mean, you or I, sure, we'd be toast, but this guy was experienced, and he went completely crazy out there. He couldn't even tell them what happened. He just kept saying, I think they got inside me. A log snapped, sparks flurried. That didn't happen, Reese said. Look it up. As she said it, Lou realized she was peeking, the forest all alive around her, on the hairs of her arms. Wind shuffled through leaves like sand through an hourglass. It was as if the trees were breathing, were observing with uncanny intelligence. The wind stirred and stilled. Flames shivered, twisted, stamped echoes of light in the air. Burning motes snapped upward like fireflies. Lou was entranced. She was reminded of the candles set in a circle, Bryn's face illuminated from all sides in the dark of her tiny studio apartment, while the rain came down heavily, glittering the windows. And the humming, that familiar tune Bryn brought to the ritual she'd asked Lou to do only a day or two before she disappeared. A creeping feeling came over her, as if she could hear it again, some faint whisper carried by the cool drift of air, a suggestion of sound. She wanted the image out of her head. Maybe that was why she told the story about Ryan Kilkenny. She couldn't stop thinking about it, so she fed it to the fire. It was impossible not to think about what might have happened to Bryn out here. What if she had gone crazy, like Ryan? Or what if something had been haunting her, and she had been trying to get away from it? She remembered the ritual, Bryn saying, "It's like it's haunting me." The flicker of candles, the way their curls of smoke became mist, seemed to reveal a face on the other side, or a mask, or maybe it was only Lou's imagination. But that was how she felt now, like Bryn was haunting them on the other side of the smoke. "Did you see that?" came Jacqueline's frantic whisper. "Don't worry, babe." Reese wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I'll protect you from the scary hiker with the knife." Lou's eyes traced the tree line where the fire's ghost imprinted green echoes. Every little movement stole her attention. The forest was a sea of shifting patterns. "Oh," she sucked in a breath. "I see it." See what? She squinted in the faint light, trying to discern reality from the shudder of her own eyeballs, but she was sure she'd seen something. A pale shape moving within the trees. "It's Ryan Kilkenny," Harlow deadpanned. "Ryan Kilkenny is dead. He didn't even make it to the hospital." "Or maybe he's still out here." But the shape did not look human. It was all wrong, long and with too many legs. The strangeness unsettled her until relief finally swarmed into her body as the shape came into focus. "It's the deer." "What deer?" "The one I saw earlier." She crept closer to the trees, trying to get a better view. The animal moved like liquid, smooth and powerful. A log in the fire popped. Its head turned toward the sound. White antlers spidered from its white skull. Wendy said it must be albino. Thorne said he'd never seen one like it before. Then it streaked away, gone in the trees like smoke. "Damn," Reese said. "I am tripping." And then they were all laughing and calling him high. Lou and Jacqueline and Harlow laughing because they were high too. And hell, even Thorne leaned in closer to the fire. Anything to join the laughter. And they laughed because they didn't want to say it. Nobody wanted to point it out. No one wanted to say the deer had no eyes.
Great job. Great chapter. Wonderful. Horror goes horror goes so well with Campfire Tales and a Campfire Tale
Right.
for the ages. I wonder if you could. I wonder, did you put together? I know on your Substack you do cocktail pairings. Did you do a cocktail pairing for this book as well?
I
Or
did.
will you? Okay. Where can tell us one more time where we can find that again?
So my Substack is, I may need to actually find the URL myself.
Okay.
Oh, here we go. Can I paste it into our chat so that you can see?
Yeah, paste it in there.
Perfect.
And
That's easier.
and I think I'll be able to put it on screen.
But the drink is called the Midnight Mule.
Okay, the Midnight Mule. And let's see, did I so is that your Substack books, booze and beats?
That's what it's called. So the URL is jokaplan.substack.com. Very simple.
Okay, everyone check out the event page on Facebook if it's not already there. We'll make sure it's there. Where can people, besides there, where can people stay in touch with you, and a preferred place to get a copy of the Midnight Muse, which came out this week?
Well, you can find me obviously on my Substack or my website, which you mentioned earlier, which is jo-kaplan.com, or my Instagram, which we've already mentioned. And you can get the Midnight Muse. You should be able to get it anywhere books are sold, but I always recommend first looking to your, local indie bookstores, independent bookstores, or if, no local bookstore has it in stock, then there's always bookshop.org, which is a great way of still supporting independent bookstores while easily doing it online.
That's fantastic. Again, wishing you a fantastic launch week for the Midnight Muse. Thank you so much for coming here and talking about the book and reading. I always forget to introduce myself. I'm Daniel Braum, the host of Nighttime Logic, and hope you'll join us next month. We'll be talking with Gwendolyn Keist. So until then, thank you very much. Thank you again, Jo. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Daniel.